Economic doomsday is what I'm predicting we're about to see. I'm seeing doomsday coming likely within the next month or two, but definitely within the next 6 months to a year. We are going to see the biggest economic crash since the Great Depression. And if you think I'm joking about this, I'm not. I've been doing research on ChatGPT for the last 3, 4 days straight, continually trying to poke holes in it, trying to figure out a way that this is not going to be the case. And it seems at this point pretty much certain that it's going to happen based on our economic system, the mechanisms, the ins and outs, the empire's status as a whole compared to, some other empires in similar boats like the Roman Empire and the British Empire. And everything seems to be fitting the puzzle perfectly where I'm almost certain it is going to happen. America is no longer going to be the United States that once was. We're going to no longer be the leader of the global economic hegemony. Pretty much our entire status on the global stage is going down. There's going to be chaos in the streets, and I'm getting ready to try to find a bunker somewhere at this point because I'm positive about this, and I feel like there's no way it can't be true. But anyway, a couple other topics in the news we wanted to get to. I think, Nick, you said you had one. What was it again?
AI psychosis. I think
What's that?
I think it's when you talk to an imaginary friend for too long and it kind of just repeatedly reinforces the same ideas that you keep giving it, kind of just gives it back to you in the same way, kind of makes you certain of certain things happening like economic doomsday or, maybe that you're the savior of mankind. I have literally seen that actually. Like AI has actually like talked people into crazy scenarios. I've already seen people have like committed suicide over getting too deep into AI. I think you may be a little too deep down the rabbit hole, Richard.
AI psychosis. Never heard of this. Sounds like I've wasted a lot of my time. No, but all jokes aside, I did do that. And obviously, I've known about the AI psychosis, and
Right.
I actually set mine up to pretty much avoid all of the kind of sycophantic yes man stuff that it does, and it's much better. But there was a time where I did kind of fall down a rabbit hole for a couple hours talking about something in the stock market, and I was thinking I was onto something, and then realized that this is just AI, just agreeing with everything I'm saying. So
Yeah, no, we talked about this the other day. I saw another one. It gave ChatGPT a very bad business idea prompt. And I think I said something to you. It was like, hey, I was thinking about opening up a shit sandwich shop. Like, does that sound like a good idea? And it's like, oh, absolutely. I see a real market niche that you can exploit here. Not many people are doing this. Do you want me to start drawing up business models for you? And obviously, it might not have been that, but like, oh, I'm gonna start investing in solar panels. I was thinking of choosing Seattle as like the first city. Like, do you think that's a good idea? And you said after that you were able to put in some prompts where it kind of cuts down on some of that behavior. Obviously, that certainly helps, but it's certainly scary that we talked about this last episode. People are so disconnected from the real world. They spend so much of their time on the internet, and the fact that not only can you get horrible, disgusting information from real people, you can also get seemingly horrible information from artificial intelligence, right? And I totally agree with what you said. I think it tells you what you want to hear, right? I was thinking about this the other day. We talk about incentive structures a lot. What is the incentive structure of an AI chatbot that you're talking to? It wants you to keep responding to it. It needs your data to get put back into their algorithm to make it smarter, right? More better responses and everything. So what does it do? It formulates its responses. It doesn't always probably tell you what you want to hear, right? But it does so in a way to get you to follow up with that prompt, essentially.
yeah, I mean, and really what it is, I mean, it's the same technology as like the autocomplete. If you're sending an email or a text and it can guess what the next word's going to
Yeah.
be, it's a similar technology to that, but it's put through one of these things called the transformers, and it basically it's that to the max. And rather than just completing the next word, it can actually answer a question. But yes, I mean, it does definitely seem like it. I mean, I know for a fact that it is tailored to the individual user. It has memory. Like I can go in there and talk about things that I've talked about with it before, and it will recall those conversations and bring that back up, or it can refer back to those. I can ask it. I could probably ask it, did I what was on my mind on, this date a year ago, and it would know. And one thing too, and we were just talking about this, is I was messing around with it and thinking about um, podcast topics, and so I asked it to give me like a list of topics that would be good for a podcast. And I'm looking through the list, and it's all like prompts, and it's all things that we've already talked about.
We
And
we
it's
do,
most
we
likely because we were on here, asking me questions and stuff about those things. So it knows those are the type of things that I'm interested in. So it is definitely like tailored to the individual, which makes sense why if me and you or me and someone else were to ask it the same exact question, it might give different answers to each of us.
yeah, I mean, I think it probably has all those responses that we've already done before, just because we do like real hard hitting journalism here, where we stick to the real topics. We cover the big stuff for you guys, so you can learn a lot along the way if you stick around. I had a question I wanted to ask you on AI. It was, do you think AI thinks? Or do you think it has a like formulaic output system, essentially?
Well, I got to pull a Jordan Peterson here and respond to that with it depends what you mean by think. Just
Yeah.
because, well, basically what we just described is it takes in some input, it kind of combines a bunch of random things that it knows and throws them together and guesses what you want to hear. And I saw an interesting tweet a while ago from Mark Andreessen, who's the founder of Netscape, talking about, someone saying that, well, it doesn't actually think. It just compiles a bunch of data that it thinks are related to this thing and then formulates them into a sentence and then responds with something you want to hear. And his response to that was like, so what does a human do? And it's pretty much that. It's just, do we really think, how much of our thinking is it feels like thinking, but really what it is just our brain searching
Most
around for
most
something that's related.
most of it, right? Like, I definitely totally agree with what you're saying. The brain is an input output machine, right? It takes in information, stores the information, refers back to that information to give its responses. That's exactly what the fucking computer does, right? So in that aspect, I totally agree. There's some aspect of our minds in the spontaneity realm, I would say, right? Where things can seemingly arise unprompted. Do you think computers are capable of like that aspect?
I mean, probably not, I would guess, but I would also think that it's possible that we aren't either. It
Yes,
just seems unprompted, but something
yes.
prompted it that was subliminal that we didn't notice.
I was gonna throw in caveats that even those seeming moments of ingenuity or randomness or whatever, science has tried in recent years to do away with that. We've talked about free will numerous times on here, and the scientific community right now, they would tell you their belief is it's probably much more likely we do not have free will, right? That we are input output machines essentially, right? But it certainly doesn't feel like it, does it?
No, yeah, and it also is just if it did feel like it, it would just be kind of less enjoyable to be a person. I feel like you got to kind of have some type of feeling that you have some control. And also, I don't think the illusion of free will might actually be the mutation that got us here, because without it we would struggle, like as a human species we would struggle to create these big societies and systems of communication and collaboration, because if we didn't have the illusion of free will, then we wouldn't be able to hold each other responsible for our actions. And
Yeah.
so there'd be no way to collaborate as a group. It would be a problem because, like, how are we going to punish someone for committing a crime when he wasn't even responsible for his actions? Once we start thinking that way, everything we know about how society should work and interactions between large groups and all this, it all kind of falls apart.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think I've brought this one up before on the podcast, but it's kind of the thought, my first act of free will shall be believing that I have free will, right? It's kind of one of those things that if you believe you have it, you basically do for all intents and purposes, right? Like, seemingly, what can't you do? If you have free will, like, what are you not able to do? did almost nothing, right? You can basically do almost anything. Can you fly if you jump off a building? No, but that doesn't mean you don't have free will. It just means you don't have wings, right? So when I boil it down, I disagree with the scientific consensus right now because I think I feel like I have free will and that's enough, and I can't think of anything that I couldn't do, right? That I basically couldn't do, essentially.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, and there's different types of truth too. I think this was a Jordan Peterson reference as well, and I think this one, well, in response to like the religious debate whether God exists, he always responds with, "Well, I choose to act as if he does." And one of his points there is that there's different types of truths. There's literal truth, where is there literally a man in the sky, or is there literally a creator, or is there literally a person named Adam and a person named Eve who were once in this garden? It's like, well, no, we don't have any evidence of that. But what we do seem to have evidence of is that it is it is true for practical purposes to believe it. If you believe it, you tend to do better. He makes that case for religion. I think I would agree that that's the case to be made for the free will argument as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What the hell did we start on? Oh, AI psychosis.
Yeah, AI
Got,
psychosis.
got to free will real quick there. I mean, that's essentially what it is about. Going back to the AI psychosis, though, you were looking up, and our hot start here. We should probably get back to that. What were you seeing in your AI driven spree yesterday in terms of economic collapse?
So the economic collapse. So obviously, I was exaggerating there for
Yeah, for
try to drive home the AI psychosis thing. And like I said, I mean, mine's pretty good. And it also, when it comes to the AI psychosis, what a lot of it comes down to, like, being aware of that, and like knowing which questions, like the way to ask the questions, and trying to stick to the facts. And I can start to get the feel when the AI is drifting a little bit in one direction. And so I've gotten pretty good at reining it in. So the economic thing, this is not AI psychosis. There is actually a major problem with the economy, and it's been a problem since 2008. And originally been looking into this, here and there over the years, and trying to make sense of it all. I got sparked back into it because I was listening to one of the guys I listened to named Ray Dalio, who was talking about how we're going to see a major economic collapse in a very short timeline. Like he's saying, within the next year or so, it's bound to happen. And I think we've talked about this before, but a lot of the big speculators are known to always be calling doomsday. It's always about to end, and it never does totally. But if they were to keep doing that forever, eventually they'd be right. And I think part of that is just these guys who are really good at seeing these economic trends. They tend to look at really big picture stuff, and on a big picture scale, it looks like it's right next to us, but really that scale is thousands and thousands of years. So really, it's hone it in. We're about to go into collapse means that we might within the next 10 years or so. But but I don't want to say it's coming this year, but it is coming, and
yeah.
in that I can say, obviously not with certainty, but with a high level of certainty, that there are some fundamental issues with the way our dollar works now. It's basically broken, and there's no way that I can see that we end up getting out of this without
Yeah,
like an absolute monetary failure, basically.
I'll I'll cut you back in here really quickly to go into like monetary policy if you're able to. But I studied economics in school. One of the things I remember from one of the classes is essentially, since we have been tracking economic data, which I think was like the 30s or 40s, maybe the 20s. But essentially, as long as we've been tracking it, the economy averages 2 recessions per decade, right? Sometimes there's one, sometimes there's three, sometimes there's none. Usually you get 2 per decade, right? 2008 happened as a result because there hadn't been one in like a decade, I believe. 2008 was an incredible bull run. Crash, crash happens. So that's a real one. From 2008 to COVID, was even better of a bull run, greatest bull run of all time, no crashes. COVID happens. We should have a market adjustment. After like 2 months, the market was already back up over that, and we've just been keeping that parabolic curve since then. So that wasn't even a real adjustment. It was like a 2 month adjustment in because of COVID. Fucking turned the money printers back on, and then we've been doing that ever since. So since '08, we've been building towards what?
Yes.
You're going to
The
like monetary policy.
Yeah, no, I like this conversation. I think this is interesting. I've been looking into this stuff a lot lately. I was going to say that yeah. So the 2008 was where I was kind of going as the starting point, and prior to that, the last recession was 1999 .com
I was gonna
bubble
say
triggered it,
'99. Yeah.
and then yeah, I think it lasted till about 2002 2003. So so typically what happens is, so we go back to 1971, we get off the gold standard, right? And so we're the world reserve currency, meaning that all of the other currencies are pegged to our dollar, which at the time was pegged to gold. But now, after 1971, it no longer is. And Nixon comes on and he comes on the TV and he says, the dollar, something along the lines of the dollar will be, backed by the secure trust of the United States government. And if there's anything we know about the government, it's that you can always trust them. And so obviously, but to be fair, that we did a fine job of being trustworthy for about,
What do you think? Like 30 years ish, something like that.
35 years or so, whatever gets us to 2008. Because, and I have a chart to kind of bring up here too. But basically, the idea would be we want to print a little bit of money per year because technology and population boom, and there ends up becoming more and more goods and services to buy. GDP goes up, and so in order to kind of keep the economy growing, we want a slow and steady increase, and that also comes with a slow and steady inflation, and that's all part of the plan. We want that. The reason we want that is because we want the rich people who have billions and billions of dollars not to just hold it all in cash or in their bank account or sit on it. We want them to reinvest it. And so if they've got billions of dollars and they know that the value of this money is going to go down 3% every year that I hold on to it, then rather than hold on to it, they're incentivized to invest it into a growing
Into the
company or
back
something
into the
like that,
economy.
get it back moving.
Right.
And so let me pull up this chart here so we can see that something happened. Now this chart goes all the way back the to 1971, but for some reason they won't I can't find one that shows it all the way back there. So we see this chart here. So what this is the total amount of reserve assets that the Fed holds. And so you can see that, from this point here, it cuts off, but it was the same steady line all the way back to uh, the 70s. And it was just a slow, slow increase. And then here we have in 2008. Now, this is the first time really that we've actually had to do this, which is called quantitative easing, which is a very complicated way of saying that we're just going to print a bunch of money and throw it into the system. And so that brought us from here to here. Now, at this point, we were only at, the total amount of reserve money was only less than $1 trillion still. It was about 900 billion when we hit the '08 crisis. And then it immediately doubled and jacked up to 2 trillion, over 2 trillion. Since then, it's been kind of that steady line is gone. It's been kind of bouncing around all over the place. But when we pulled up around COVID here in end of 2019, we were sitting at around 4 trillion. So it's four times as much
Four times
since
as much as it
2007.
was in right before we started doing this.
Yep, and then that was right before COVID hit, and then when COVID hit, it shot up to here, and it got as high as 9 trillion about. It started now. They've been doing quantitative tightening, which is pulling it back in, but that isn't going to work. But once it gets up here, so now there's 10 times as much as there was in the system less than 20 years ago. So we are playing with monopoly money at this point.
Um, so if I could cut in really quickly on that, when it's been going down a little bit since 22, you call that quantitative tightening. Why will that not work?
Is because it's a reflexive system. So for one, okay, two things here. One is everyone looks at inflation, and I want to make if anyone's watching this, I want to make this clear because this drives me nuts when they do this. Everybody looks at the CPI, which accounts for inflation, and everyone kind of uses the word inflation interchangeably to mean the rise in prices of things. So someone will say, "Oh, what happened to housing? Houses used to be a house that used to be $200,000 is now $500,000." And someone will say that's inflation. But really, when they measure inflation, they're going to come back and they're going to say, no, inflation's only been 3%, 4%. Inflation's not bad. We've got nothing to worry about. Well, that's because they're lying. Inflation isn't bad because inflation measures the consumer. They use the consumer price
It's
index
the
to measure inflation.
consumer price index, CPI. It's a bundle of goods, correct, that they
Hmm.
use to determine if essentially if inflation is happening. However, they can totally cheat the CPI. They've like changed the goods that are involved in the basket numerous times, and that doesn't account for things like houses.
Exactly. It doesn't account for assets. And if you look at some of the stocks here, um, I mean, from the time that 2008 happened, I mean, if you look at any like tech stock or anything, stock price has gone up, 2,000% or something. Asset prices are skyrocketing, and the reason for that is because when they print this money, this is reserve money, so it's different than like a deposit you'll see in your bank account at the bank. That's what they call M2 money, but this is like the base money. Kind of think of it as like this is what's backing the money that the people use basically, and this money never even reaches the consumer. This money goes straight into the financial institutions who use that money to create these financial instruments and invest in different assets. And so most of the time this creates asset bubbles. Now, what so the problem is the absorption mechanism, right? So the whole idea and the idea that backs this is called modern monetary theory. And the thing about it is it's not modern at all. This is how empires go broke. It's how they've been going broke since the Roman Empire. They did the exact same thing. When the Roman Empire had a ton of debt, they were overextended in a bunch of wars, and they couldn't pay their bills, they couldn't keep their promises. What they started doing was they started taking back. I can't remember what the coin's name was. I think it was like the denarius or something like
It's like
that.
the drachma or something.
Yeah, something. Yeah,
Uh,
that might be it. And then so they would take the coin that they've been giving out that was 99% silver. And so what they would do is they'd melt it down and they'd start making like alloys where there was like cheaper metals in it and stuff. So it wouldn't actually have nearly as much value as it used to have, but they'd be able to create more of them and basically trick the people into thinking that they had more money, but it was the same amount of the silver or the gold.
same amount of value.
It's yeah. Each coin became less and less valuable as they did this. They were debasing the currency. Now that's exactly what we're doing here. And the idea of this modern monetary theory that they're throwing around is that, well, the government doesn't actually need to have money to spend money because they could just spend the money. They create the money. They can spend it as much as they want. The only reason they collect taxes really is to combat inflation. So they can spend as much as they want, and then they could just tax it back, and that way, it all kind of comes back in, and that they can use that to combat if inflation or asset bubbles are going crazy. But the reason why they actually can't is because if it was inflation, they would be able to do that, and the prices of consumer goods would go up, and then they'd start bringing the money back in, and then the prices would go back down. That's the idea on paper, but the problem is that the money's not making it to the consumer transactions. The prices of goods at the grocery stores, sure they went up, but they didn't go up like 5x. They might have doubled probably over the last six years since COVID, but they didn't go up 500 600% the way that the assets did. The problem is now if you want to tax it back, well, you're going to have to take that money out of the assets. And what happens when you start taking money out of the assets? Well, all of the people who own the assets start selling the assets. Now, the housing market crashes, the stock market crashes, everything crashes, and we already know that when everything crashes, there's
You
only
print
one
more
way.
money.
There's only one way to save the economy, and that's to print more money. So it's basically kind of like a drug, is the way I've heard it, where the economy's suffering. I'll
That's
take a
that's the
painkiller.
point. That's the point. The death spiral. I think I've heard Ray Dalio even refer to it as, right. It's like that like seventh stage or whatever where you can't do anything else besides print more money, which is just more poison essentially.
Yeah, and it grows exponentially. Like the amount of money we would need to print to
Yeah.
recover every time is going to be more and more and more. And eventually we do hit a spot of hyperinflation if if we even get there. Now, the other problem is that we do also rely on investors buying our bonds, long-term investment in the United States dollar. But if they start seeing that the dollar is just being devalued, more and more often and at higher and higher levels, then, they start losing trust in the bond market, then the yield spikes, then we got problems there too. It's just there's problems all over the place once this keeps going on for a little while. But
Yeah.
what drives me nuts is I still see you see these professional, financial speculators or these economists, and they're on the news, they're on these channels talking about how well modern monetary theory is actually just a new, and it's like no, it's not, it's not new at all. The Roman Empire did it, the British Empire did it, the Dutch Empire did it, all of them right before they hit their decline. So I don't think it's that new.
Yeah. So you brought up, like, yields going down. If anyone's ever heard the term yield curve inverting, right? This is an issue that is going to happen in the bond market. Uh, what that means is typically if you have, say, a 1 year bond, it should pay out a little bit of money. A 5 year should pay out more, and a 10 year should pay out more than that, right? The longer amount of time you hold it, the more amount of money that you get at the end. When the yield curve inverts, that's when, say, you're now getting a higher return on a 1 year bond as opposed to, say, a 10 year bond. That's a very bad sign for an economy.
So I've been kind of trying to wrap my mind around the yield curve too. I was looking at it the other day, and it didn't quite click for me exactly how it, you know how it serves as an indicator. So if the yield is down on the long term and up on the short term.
That means foreign investors are looking at us and going, I would have rather have 1 year than 10 years in this country.
I thought it was the opposite. I thought if the long term yield was lower, then that means that there's more people buying the long term ones than the short term. Or am I confusing that?
No, yeah, no, I think that's correct. If it's Ask ChatGPT because I'm getting confused now. But I think
Yeah.
yield curve inversion means short term is like higher and long term is lower, which is a bad thing.
Yeah, I do remember seeing it because it did invert in, I think it was like 2022, and it was, it's there's a lag, so it was like a couple years after COVID they had done the quantitative easing, and then I remember seeing a lot of people posting about how the yield curve was inverted, and I looked into it back then, thought I kind of understood it, and it's been a while, and I haven't refreshed on it. But the yield is basically the price of the bond, really, or the value of the bond. So they need to offer more money to buy the bond, basically. But
A
let's see what
yield
they
curve
say.
inversion occurs when short term treasury yields are higher than long term treasury yields, which is what I said, I believe. A rare and historically reliable indicator that investors expect a recession or significant economic slowdown in the future. This occurs because investors anticipate lower interest rates and economic activity, leading them to demand higher yields for short-term bonds and accept lower yields for long-term bonds, which are seen as a safer investment during economic uncertainty.
Makes sense. So basically, it's an indicator of short term uncertainty. Because obviously, if they need to justify buying a short term bond that is, it's free market. It's a supply and demand. There's low demand for the short term bonds unless the yield on the short term goes up, then more people are more willing to buy them. Is that right?
Basically, I think they're saying, like, you're fucked short term. If you want a short term loan, you have to pay me more. If not, I'll take a long term. I'll do it the long term because I think you'll be better off 20 years from now than you will be right now. I believe
Yeah,
is
yeah. That's okay. That's kind of what
Yeah.
I was thinking too. Yeah. Okay. So either way, I guess, indication, if we're talking about the economic collapse, um, indicates a recession. Now, I wonder what it is right now. I was looking at it, and I don't believe it's still inverted. I think it has corrected, because here's an interesting thing too. Sorry, I'm going on a little tangent, but the 2020 crash, what caused that crash? Do we remember? Was there an event?
COVID.
That's what I thought too. But it turns out that no, the crash started and the Fed actually lowered the interest rate prior to COVID beginning in March of 2024, like a week before COVID started. So, strange coincidence. Seems like a good cover for a something like you know a dollar that doesn't work as a currency. But So the yield curve here, this is what it is here. I'll share it real quick. Um, it is still, or it is technically not really inverted, I don't think. So you got the short term over here. You can see you got 1 month, 2 month, 3 month. And so they're going here between about, 4 and 4.2%. I think short term is everything below like 2 years, I want to say, or maybe three. So everything here is below, um, about 4.2%. But then when you get to the long term, 7, 10, 20, and 30, now you're bumping up here to around 4.5%. But this thing is pretty good because I can go back to, let's try 2023, and you can see this is what is meant by the inversion, meaning that the um, the coupon rate basically here is going for, back here it was high for the short term. We're looking at 5.5%, but for the long term it's a lot lower. It's only 4.5%. So
What like
basically,
2006, if you can.
okay. So similar inversion here, um, which I mean, and there is a lag to it. So I think when we talk about like the yield curve inverting, it doesn't mean that like a big crash is happening tomorrow. When it goes back is usually when the actual stock crash comes.
Silky there.
So if we go to 2007, yeah, there we go, some free advertisements. So 2007 September is when it is around when it came back. It looks like, and I think let's go July. Yeah, so you can see it's coming back over the course of the summer of 2007. And then I do think it was like September, October of 2007 that the housing crash began. So um, just some historic data to work off of there.
I like it. You got anything more on economic collapse? We move on, or
Yeah, we can move on. I guess one thing just kind of interesting,
yeah,
Roman Empire. I was looking into that a little bit, and I found this pretty interesting. So one thing they did once they started debasing the currency, once you start, you can't stop. And the coins were getting smaller. There was like small details. They would have like little different stuff to them. Obviously, prices for things were going up. Things were a little bit weird in the economy, and the Roman Empire had been around for hundreds of years, and there wasn't really any massive boom bust cycles, like we see nowadays, because they're using metals back then. But it was starting to happen, and it was because they were debasing the currency, and I believe it started during Nero's time. And if you remember, Nero was the emperor of Rome who burned down an entire like poor village so that he can build himself a new palace. And the notorious story is him playing the fiddle as Rome burned. He was just like a terrible guy, and like a very greedy, like self-absorbed guy. And he was the one that started debasing the currency because he was spending so much money, like so lavishly. Like he was basically blowing all of the empire's money on like nonsense that he didn't need. And so in order to fix that, that was kind of what he started. But once you start, you can't stop. So after he was gone, in order to keep things going, they had to keep doing it. And but to get to the interesting part, they did it forever, and no one really noticed. No one really said much about it, and the reason why is because once money started coming up, what they would do is they would throw these like hot button cultural issues out there, and kind of intentionally set one group of the commoners, the peasants, against another group of the peasants, and so that way they would be busy fighting each other about some type of cultural nonsense. I don't even know what it was back then. Probably transgenders and abortion, but it's all stuff like that that they argue about. Meanwhile, they're not paying attention that the government is debasing the currency again. That's also where the phrase "bread and circuses" comes from. Is that they would kind of purposely favor certain groups and like shower them with like circuses and all this stuff. It would basically kind of manipulate the people so that they were constantly focused on each other and never focused up on the empire. And I found that interesting because it does seem like quite the coincidence that this happened in 2008, and very shortly after, our politics in America became an absolute circus, a spectacle, something that people can argue with each other about and never look at the Federal Reserve balance sheets.
yeah, that doesn't sound at all like what's happening today, pitting people against each other with cultural issues.
Yeah, I mean, You know, how often have you seen Trump even really talk about the federal balance sheet, or not only Trump, but any politician? You
Never.
hear you hear
Like,
tax the rich, or you hear, you know, deport the immigrants. But what you don't hear is, well, we need to stop quantitative easing because the more we do this, then the more the Federal Reserve's balance sheets are going to keep increasing and debasing our currency. It's like, why don't they say that? Well, it's because that's not going to win them many votes because a lot of people don't know what it means. But still, I mean, it would be nice to see someone address the issue somehow.
yeah, I mean, could be a nice tie-in here towards what we were talking about with direct democracy. I mean, what you were talking earlier about the fact that realistically we have a very large population that is represented by, was it like 465 people, something like that? That 465 people are supposed to take into account, the thoughts and needs and wants of 300 million plus people. It was set up this way originally because, it's 1700. You can't have everyone vote on everything all the time. It's just not really uh, doable. But we were arguing today we have the technology to be able to implement some sort of direct democracy wherein we may not need legislatures anymore. Everyone can vote on it, right? I maybe not every single person has internet access, but I think that you could set it up wherein there's like a library or some kind of even just voting facility within 30 miles of everyone, essentially, that anyone who doesn't have internet access can go there and cast their votes. But I think that's something that's very doable in today's day and age.
I mean, the technology's definitely there from a utility standpoint. I mean, you can make a poll online and people can click a button, no problem. The main problem might be cybersecurity. You know, it's got to be unhackable. I think blockchain does solves a lot of that problem. Another problem would be the centralization of it. I mean, who is it? Is it Facebook? Because then Zuckerberg gets to pick the president. You know, it's got to
Yeah.
be like a decentralized kind of stable, secure network, basically, where there wouldn't be any way for anyone to manipulate it. And I'm sure we'll be there soon. I mean, the problem I think is more so less that we're not going to get there as far as the technology. I think it's more so that, you know, will our systems, when it comes to our political systems, be able to keep up? Looking at our Congress now, that I don't think that shift happens very rapidly. You know.
I mean, essentially, you are asking lawmakers to sign away a law that strips them of all power. Right? You look at like, oh, why can't we ever have like any sort of political change? Well, that's the reason. Is because the people who are there right now do not want the system to change.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the other thing too. I mean, it could go both ways. It could be, you know, you have a digital way of voting for a candidate, but I mean, we were even talking about like at that point, why do you even need the candidate? Because you could just, you know, I guess you need someone to draft the bills and stuff. But when it comes to actual voting on the bills, it doesn't need to be your congressman. You know, it doesn't need to be your district senator. It could just be like if you're in the district, you get to vote on whether you agree with the bill or not, and it's just straight to the people. You know, I think
Why
that would
can't
be
the
pretty
people
cool.
write the laws? Like you're able
I
to,
mean, they
you're
realistically, they yeah.
you're able to write up a law and you send it around to some people like, hey, does this look good? They're like, oh yeah, like I would throw that on there. Maybe you need a certain amount of votes to get onto like the voting, like docket or
Yeah,
whatever. And
I mean,
then
when it comes to writing the laws, there's got to be like you got to like pass a test or something because it. I mean, codifying in like you know this is we will kill you if you don't do this. You know, from the United States government, it's got to be probably professionally done or at least professionally like approved in some way. So maybe not anyone can write the bill, but maybe you could just you
why couldn't you like
earn a
write
reputation
why
and
couldn't you just like write the law and then submit it? Be like, is this cool? You're like, oh yeah, like that looks cool enough to me.
yeah, I mean, you probably could, but I would just be worried, like, practically, you'd probably get a lot of, like, ridiculous laws that I mean, I think we underestimate, like, how many people there are who have, like, 0 understanding of
Well,
incentive structures
so now
work or how
let's
law
let me
we
heart
have it would be the law is, yeah, we spend the law is we print $300 trillion and everyone becomes a billionaire, you know,
and
that's the law, like,
let me
we'd have a lot of that.
let me go in there. why was it originally set up like a republic? Why was it that only wealthy landowning white men could vote originally? It's because most of the time the people in power do not trust the plebeians to make decisions.
Yes.
They
And I
set
think rightly so. I think rightly so in a lot of cases.
in probably a lot of cases, rule of the mob is how it's referred to as sometimes, right? Like true democracy is also, I've heard, just referred to as rule of the mob. You get 51% of people saying something, and all right, like that's the way it is. It's so it's kind of that's a very philosophical question right there. Is should everyone get the right to vote equally? Essentially, like it because that's all it comes down to is if you're like you just said like, oh, I kind of agree that we got to like not let the rabble agree, but the question comes down to, is everyone equal? Should everyone be equal in like the creation of laws, essentially?
Yeah, and I mean, I kind of hold a somewhat controversial opinion on this, but I mean, it seems fair to me, but it depends what we want to optimize for. I think that if we wanted to optimize for efficiency and, stability, um, I think then the correct answer would be no. I mean, this was your quote. Politics should be boring, right? I agree. Most of the people don't really know much about what they're talking about, which is why we see, like cultural sloganeering, kind of like nonsense, hot button issues being discussed in all of the campaign ads, in all of the, all of the limelight, when really some of these actual deep internal issues are the fundamental source of the problem. And now, among the politicians and among the elites, they know that this is the problem. They know that we don't need to. It's not DEI or it's not none of this, crazy stuff. It has a lot to do with the economic structure. They know that, but they also know that most of the voters don't know that, and so they have to appeal to most of the voters, and so it causes a lot of this like political strife basically where people are yelling at each other about fascism and communism, and neither of the people know what either of those words mean. And so I do think it would be not a terrible idea if, in order to vote, you did have to pass a basic constitution test or a basic economics test or something to show that you actually are voting based on something of knowledge, I guess. Whereas, everyone talks about voter turnout and it's your duty to vote, as an American. And I disagree with that. I think I would be willing to guess that the higher the total voter turnout is, the less likely the better candidate is to win. I would guess that that's probably a thing.
Yeah, it's possible. I was now going to quote you. You were kind of talking about how you have to campaign on slogans and things like that because most people don't understand what M1 money versus M2 money is, right? Most people have to look up what the yield curve inversion means before they
Yeah.
spout it out on a
Those idiots who
podcast.
had to look
Right.
it up. Yeah.
Exactly. But you said this over text. All political slash cultural problems are really just masquerading as economic problems.
Yep. And that's 100% true. Name one.
Abortion, is that really an economic problem? Like,
Yes, absolutely. Abortion is an
well,
economic problem.
okay, in that
I
aspect,
get
but in the reason that it's fought over, I don't think it's an economic issue.
Well, I think it is because I think that abortion and immigration are the same issue. I think that the problem is that our debts, similar to what we've been talking about, we owe a lot of money in the future. In order to make that money, we need to produce things, we need to have a workforce, and the birth rate is plummeting. So, on one side of the aisle, on the right side, they're saying, well, a good way to artificially boost the birth rate is to ban abortions. And that's a two birds, one stone problem because once we say that we're going to ban abortions, then guess we get to win all the evangelical Christian vote. And so that would be a good voter demographic for us as well. So I think that's a good idea. Now, the left, they say, and rightly so, I think, well, that would be a total violation of people's freedom of choice. What we're going to do is we are going to fill that workforce gap with immigrants. We're going to say we're going to be soft on the border so that more immigrants can come in. And in that sense, also a two birds, one stone issue, because then we get a lot of the Hispanic vote, a lot of the minority vote, and we can smear our opponents as racist. And that's it's a lot of like the covert reasoning versus the overt portrayal, to all of the people who don't understand why the birth rate matters to the future of our country, then we can just say, well, it's actually about racism. That's why we want to open up the borders, because we want to welcome all races and diversity and everything. And then, and then the Republicans can say, well, it's actually about Jesus and God, and that's why we think abortion is bad. And really, it's all trying to solve this problem: how do we continue this capitalist economy rolling forward, even though we're getting to the bottom of the barrel and there's nothing left.
Yeah, it could be a overt versus covert situation, right? Like, all right, like we actually need soft on immigration to be able to boost our workforce. We actually need to ban abortions so that we can boost our workforce. It could be. Do
Yeah,
you
I mean, and
really
I'm not
think
saying it for sure is, but I I am
do you
I
really
think it
think
is.
that's the underlying issue? It's probably a little bit of both, maybe. Like
I think it is. I
it
mean,
always falls somewhere in the middle because people do actually care about those issues, right? Like me and you are more on the economic side of things and say like the culture war is kind of bullshit. People do in fact care about the culture war.
for one, it's more entertaining and it's also interesting. But I think that, I guess my point being is that, at least partially, one of the main jobs of a politician, or a campaign at least, is to take an issue that no one actually cares about because they don't fully understand it or because it's boring, but it's actually like a big threat, and then translate that into an issue that everyone cares about. I think that they do that on almost every issue. Now, the gun one, I haven't thought about that one,
I
but I
mean,
would
there
be
is big
willing to bet
money in
there's something.
guns. There is big money in guns. People manufacturers make a shit ton of money. The NRA is one of the biggest fucking political lobbyers, so there has to be money involved in the manufacturing of firearms.
I mean, honestly, you're probably not going to like this one, but it's possible that they want to take the guns away so that there is no uprising. Because what's their biggest fear is an uprising. That's why they need to keep printing the money and keep distracting everyone. It's the same thing they did in Rome, the bread and circuses. Well, we don't want an uprising, so we got to keep people fighting each other. It
I
could
don't want
be
to
if
take people's guns away. I just don't want the sale of very, very dangerous guns, essentially. I think you should be able to own a pistol. I think you should be able to own a rifle. I think you should be able to own a shotgun. It's those like high magazine and like high fire rate weapons that I think we could probably do without. I think 300 million people with a pistol would still be able to uprise.
yeah, I think there should be at least like a process, even if it's like very, very difficult and tedious and like barely anyone actually does it. It should be possible to get like a pretty high caliber weapon, but you have to go undergo like a very, similar process that you would have to get into like the CIA or something, when it
Yeah.
comes to just like testing your psychology, making sure you know how to use
I
it,
mean, yeah,
making sure you
like
practice
the
safety.
easiest one that I think both sides agree on is better mental health checks, like
Yeah,
background
yeah, I
back
think that's
like
more than fair.
stronger background checks. I think even the most gun loving people would agree with that, saying like, yeah, I don't want crazy people owning guns either.
Yeah. No, I think that that is definitely fair. I think, yeah, anyone in their right mind agrees on that.
Longer waiting periods, I think as well. You know, if you want to own a gun and you're
Yeah, you
18,
can't get one today. Yeah.
if well there's I think it's like a Simpsons quote. He like goes into a gun shop because he just got pissed off or whatever, goes into a gun shop. He's like, all right, I want to buy this one. The guy's like, what do you mean, like you can't take that home today? He's like, you have to wait 3 days to until you can pick it up. And Homer's like, 3 days, are you kidding me? I'm angry now. Right. Like it's one of those deals, but it is something like I have a buddy who's very interested in guns. I think he has to wait a few days or maybe like a week in between purchasing them. Couldn't that be like a few months? You know, like
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I do think it makes sense, and for, especially for like like an AK-47 or something, I don't think it should be like entirely impossible for anyone to ever have one in here except for the military, but it should be you should have to give up like some of your privacy even, like you should have to be like monitored for a while before you get one of like I'd be willing to say like the test that you have to go through to get it should be like very, very difficult to
yeah,
pass, or at least invasive, you know.
yeah. Thoughts on this one? Politics is just Hollywood for ugly nerds. All they want is the limelight.
I mean, nowadays it definitely seems like it. It seems like that's the main. That's definitely what it's turned into. I'm wondering if it's the cause and the chicken and the egg. Did Trump cause that, or is Trump a symptom of that?
Probably a
Tend to lean towards
symptom of
symptom.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, which sounds strange to say. I mean, Obama was a little bit like that, but nothing to the degree of Trump. But it's actually scarier to think that way because that means that like it's not going to end when Trump's gone. It's going to keep going.
I don't think it will end when Trump's gone. I
No,
don't
I don't
think
think it
we
will. Yeah.
no, I don't think we see a Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama next time around, like two very respectable, well-spoken people that, actually can discuss issues and not just throw shade at each other. I don't really see that happening.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a result of social media that
Yeah.
life has just become a reality show. Not that I'm not even talking conspiracy theory, but I just think it makes logical sense, especially nowadays, that a lot of these people in power, we always talk about this shadowy group of people in power. Well, yeah, obviously some of them are politicians. Obviously there is probably some form of deep state, and then obviously the people who likely have the most power are the people, the billionaires and the banks and the rich people. And at this point, th- they all know each other, eh, at least digitally. Like that might have been a conspiracy theory 50 years ago. It's like, oh, they're all hanging out and discussing. But at this point, like they definitely can communicate with each other, no problem. And I don't understand why they wouldn't if they're all kind of working together and those guys at the high level probably do understand and talk about a lot of these serious issues. They're not talking about racism and pronouns and stuff like that. I guarantee it. And so I do wonder if social media, if we might be in the early kind of growing pains of social media, but eventually it as the elites get used to working with it and getting control over the populations again, then maybe it ends up kind of shifting what democracy even is. It kind of becomes a whole nother thing now where, you know, sounds kind of bad now that I say it, but like there really would be like a kind of disconnect between people who have the power and the rest of us.
Like, so in this theoretical, you're saying like they essentially control us through social media,
Not necessarily, but they
which they already might do.
and yeah, I'm sure they
Which
already do to a degree, but I'm saying I'm operating under the assumption that the continuation of the US dollar and just America as a project is in the interest of these people. This is one thing that I would disagree with the left on a lot when they would try to claim things like oh, like Trump's a fascist, he's taking over, they want to destroy the country, or both sides, I guess. They'd say, oh, these guys want to destroy the country, these guys want to destroy
no
the
one wants
country.
to destroy the country. That's just
It's in
a
there.
crazy thing to say.
Or like even like somebody like Elon, one thing I would say is like, well, everyone would say, well, that's so dumb. Why would he do that? And it's like, it doesn't make any sense to me that it's dumb and that he's doing it to hurt the country or to hurt the dollar, to hurt the economy. They're likely doing it because the economy is already hurt and they are grasping for straws. Now, I guess my theory going with is it almost will take some type of collusion between them to understand that we now live in this like reality TV style reality. And so to kind of play the game of like, okay, right now we need to do this, but people are going to be pissed about it. So like we need Marjorie Taylor Greene and AOC. We need you guys to get out on the floor of the Capitol building and start getting into a screaming match so that we can post it all over social media so everyone will talk about that. And then that way, we can print some more money here. We could we could distract the people. It's the modern day circus. I don't know if that's already happening, but I would bet that that is the way things trend towards, I guess.
So in the AI prompt, is social media hurting democracy or helping democracy? You're thinking it's hurting?
Well, that's a different question. I mean, I think it helps. It gives everyone an actual voice. It gives you an opportunity to search out other information that you wouldn't hear on the three mainstream media channels that we were used to seeing. And I think that part's helpful. Um, But
But
it's tough to say. I mean, currently it doesn't seem like it's helping. It seems like it's
no,
worse than
it
ever.
seems like it's dividing us more than anything, right? You'd think that the internet, when it first was founded, everyone thinks, oh, this is going to bring the whole world together, essentially, right? And in some aspects, it does. You can talk to people in China if you wanted to, right? And that was something that interesting that I saw happen when Elon took over Twitter. Maybe it was when he made some changes or something like that. But liberals were leaving and they were going to what was it? Red Note. The app was called Red Note. It was basically like a Chinese version of Twitter. And so they were going on
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
They were like going on there and like talking to Chinese people, and that's like one of the first times that I've seen it where it's like, oh, like this is actually people reaching out like across borders sort of deal and communicating.
Dude, you know what's gonna be kind of crazy now too? That's really gonna throw off a lot of the system is these new like headphones that they're coming out with, where it can translate in real time. You see that?
Yeah, that should be pretty cool.
I mean, that's really gonna, there's not gonna be much opportunity to use propaganda on another country when you can just like understand a speech from the president of that country and you can hear exactly what he's saying and everyone understands what he's saying. I feel like that's gonna really it's gonna really bring like a global kind of connection, maybe even a global government.
Did you see that Nepal overthrew its government via Discord?
So I just saw like a headline on that, but I didn't actually
Yeah.
see the story.
Yeah, so Nepal recently people rose up, overthrew their government. Apparently the catalyst of it though was like all of like Gen Z and like Gen Alpha had like made massive Discord channels about like, yo, this shit's fucked up. We should stop this. And yeah, basically kind of what we were saying in terms of like social media connecting people, and maybe it could be a good or bad thing. I don't know if you consider this a good or bad thing. If it's an oppressive government, it's a good thing. That's actually like one of the first things written into uh, our Declaration of Independence. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for, it's like something about overthrowing your government, do it sort of deal. Essentially, they just got together and discussed over Discord, which is pretty insane that it's like allowed to happen. You would kind of think that the government would have some kind of ears into the system a little bit. Maybe they really don't. Another kind of interesting point to that I had seen. I'm seeing. You're probably not going to be familiar with this at all, but have you ever heard of One Piece?
I don't think so.
It's a Japanese anime and manga, but they're using like the symbolism. They're pirates in this, right? It's like the Jolly Roger, like that flag. They're using like that flag that they use in that show. I've seen that like over numerous countries of like protests. People are like flying that flag as a sort of like anti-establishment sort of thing, because the whole point of that series is it's like kind of like a bunch of kids kind of like fighting against like the world government essentially. So it's kind of they're using that symbolism sort of.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And this wait, where did you say this was?
That was Nepal, but
Okay, yeah.
I'd seen the flag in like several other countries.
Dude, did you see that kind of reminds me, did you see Elon's speech to the like that British rally that was going on? Like I can't think of what it's called. Hang on, let me look it up so I don't say the wrong thing
I
here.
I
But do you know what I'm
think
talking about or no?
I think I have seen that. Um, was that the one where he's? I think I had seen it in my algorithm posed as Elon gives address to like far right uh movement of Britain or whatever, but I think it was kind of all about like free speech or something, right?
Well, yeah, I mean it was Unite the Kingdom event in London organized by Tommy Robinson was the guy I was trying to think of. Yeah, he's like a right-wing activist, kind of like seems like a similar to the MAGA movement here. But I watched some of it on Twitter and they pulled up Elon on the screen. Basically, it was kind of like I think what they're protesting is that they've also got like massive immigration and you've got like the immigrants that come in who are like granted benefits and kind of have a little bit of an advantage compared to the people who were born here who at least in their perspective feel like they're getting screwed so they're all fired up about that. I'm sure there's like a bunch of other stuff when it comes to, the way their government's going. But Elon was really like firing them up. There was a quote, and it was something along the lines of, "You don't have to choose violence. The violence will come to you, whether you like it or not. The only thing you have to choose is whether you fight back." Like he says that to a crowd of an angry mob of basically the British version of the J6ers. And so I heard that and I was thinking like, oh yeah, Camels is gonna not like that one.
I had seen that. I hadn't really seen too much like come out of it, but again, I had just kind of seen that phrased in the sort of, I mean, kind of exactly how you just described it, but just Elon Musk gives inflammatory remarks to far right movement in the UK, essentially. I just kind of saw it and I was just kind of like, I mean, kind of makes sense.
This was like a day or two after the Charlie Kirk shooting too.
Oh, was
So
it?
I remember watching it and being like, shit, this is looking this is
Well,
this is looking like something.
if we're on that topic, um, and then I guess I'll have to broach the subject. The Charlie Kirk Memorial Service, aka MAGA rally, because that looked like no memorial service I've ever seen, with pyrotechnics and speeches from all of the major power players in the on the right. Stephen Miller gave an address, uh, basically stealing a speech called "The Storm is Coming" from Joseph Goebbels. If anyone's unfamiliar with him, he was the head of propaganda for the Nazis. Basically, a paraphrase would be polite, I would say. Uh, it's another anti-immigration thing, essentially. It's like, oh yeah, these people are coming in, the storm is coming. Like the warrior stands resolute against like the oncoming storm sort of deal. But at a certain point, if it looks like a fascist and it talks like a fascist, might be a fascist.
I mean, so that's
It looks like
that's the thing I keep debating is if so I mean, and correct me, I'm not like accusing you of this, but if we're gonna go on and we're gonna call people fascists in public, now I'm not saying us, we don't get enough views to cause any violence, but if if someone's gonna go on the media on CNN or on MSNBC or even like a big influencer on Twitter and repeatedly hammer down the idea that we're being run by a fascist regime, wouldn't and you just said it not long ago that it would be our obligation as
the
American
right of the
citizens to take
people
up
to,
arms.
yeah.
And so it, if people are saying that, then that's what that comes with. If that's what people believe, then fine. But then you can't say that and then simultaneously say, but I don't condone violence. And don't get me wrong, I know what you're saying. It does look like a fascist. It does sound like a fascist, but I would make the opposite case. I would say that doesn't mean it's a fascist unless we're talking about like something that he's actually doing policy wise that is fascist. We talked a
And
little bit about it last time. Like what does that even really mean? I mean, I think the word itself has been watered down to a point where no one takes it serious.
and we had even discussed this earlier today. The whole thing is, no, we are not quite there yet in terms of fascism. Is that really a safe enough spot to be? Like, well, we're not
You're
quite
saying
there
keep
yet,
yeah, yeah.
But you had looked it up. Elections in democracy, Trump has not abolished elections or established one party rule, though he attempted to overturn the 2020 election results. Nationalism, I would certainly say that that one checks that box. Leader cult, Trumpism centers heavily on personal loyalty to Trump rather than institutions, similar in structure to fascist leader cults, though less absolute. I would say that one checks the box. Paramilitary element, we're invading countries, or not, we're not invading countries right now. That's been standard American policy for decades.
What are we
Um,
talking about? He just ended 7 wars.
oh my God, what a fucking jackass. Uh, saved millions of lives, right? Deserves a Nobel Peace Prize, according to only
Yeah.
him. Um, Paramilitary element, we're currently sending in the National Guard into different cities. Now, I don't think they've come to Chicago yet. Doesn't mean they're not. He said Memphis is next. Maybe that's just another empty Trump threat, but is deploying the military really ever an empty threat. Economics were not there yet. So I wanted to bring this up to you
That's the big
at
one,
a
is the
certain
economic.
point about fascism. One way I've heard fascism described is complete private ownership of the government. And
So I guess I don't.
it says here
So I
Trump
guess
supports
yeah.
deregulated
Elaborate on that.
capitalism, not corporatist state control. Right? So that's the definition I was saying. Corporate state control is private entities literally owning and running the government.
That actually makes sense because I was actually getting in a conversation with somebody on Twitter about this, and he described it in a similar way, which is that it's the end result of late stage capitalism. Eventually, you know the oligarchs form and consolidate and grow so big that they actually have disproportionate power compared to the government, and then they kind of, I guess, in that way, own the government a little bit. So I can see that. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, but here's the thing: is in that economic portion, privately owned, corporatist state control. I think we're relatively close to that, but that is not Trump. That is not entirely Trump's doing, right? That has been going on for years and years. Is money being soaked into politics, right? So that's not on Trump. That's not on solely the Republican Party. That is on really like probably the end result of late stage capitalism, essentially. But it's not one party's fault or the other. And then the last two here it had was militarism. Um, I wouldn't even really say that one fits him all too much. We haven't joined any new wars. He said he was going to end the old ones, but I never held him to that, right? I knew he wasn't going to be able to do that, right? It's not his fault
Maybe
that
ice. Maybe ice.
ICE,
I guess would be
kind
the only
of,
way
and
I can see
then
that.
a little bit of the National Guard as well being deployed, I would say fits in there. Totalitarianism. Trump does not aim to control all aspects of life. He operates within pluralistic U.S. society, blah, blah, blah. So that one, no. And then the conclusion ChatGPT came to was not a textbook fascist, closer to authoritarian populism. He combines nationalism, leader cult, disdain for norms, and attempts to delegitimize elections, but without creating a one-party totalitarian state, which I think I would agree with.
Let's stay on this one for
Yeah,
a little bit here because this one I feel like it's come up quite a bit. I mean, the first time we had this a bit of a debate on this was at the Halloween episode a year ago, and it's still a thing. And so I feel like we could. This is a good one that we should not like rush through. Because I do want to think about it. At first, my opinion was okay. Fascist is just the new word they're throwing out. It's the same as like racist or whatever, and it's kind of a campaign smear tactic. And then, you know, kept going after he won, and up until very recently, to me, it was registering as just propaganda, fake. I feel like he's leaned into it a little bit in the last couple months when it comes to the militarization of like the
yeah,
domestic areas and things like this. And now you've got his guy at the thing quoting Goebbels or and stuff like that. Where the same way I kind of gave the ultimatum, well, if it's fascist, then that means it justifies violence. I'll give the same ultimatum to Trump and say like, okay, well, if you're not a fascist, then like, and everyone thinks you are, then maybe stop like giving them more and more reason to believe that, like if Trump actually believes that, well, the quote that's been going around, well, it's not that they think I'm a fascist, so they try to kill you or to kill me. It's that they call you a fascist so that they have a reason to kill you, right? I've seen that go around on the right, that's kind of the propaganda now. And well, if that's the case, if they're gonna try to kill us, well, then maybe stop doing that, So I will give that. But one thing I'll say is that when it comes to like this idea of fascism, it is one of those words. Same thing when they used to say like Nazi, they still do, I guess. It's like, okay, but that word doesn't mean anything anymore. And you can pick out pieces like okay, even this speech from Stephen Miller. It's like, okay, but that speech alone might be identical to a speech that one of the prominent Nazis gave, but the reason that the Nazis were bad was not because they gave that speech. It's because they genocided, 6 million people. And so, that massive crime is tied to the word Nazi, but Nazi also there's a bunch of other things that are, pretty neutral. It wasn't like their fashion sense that everyone hated him for. And
That
so,
that rhetoric that Goebbels used to instill that form of government, essentially, uh, in and of itself, might not be a terrible thing. However, hearkening back to it does not score you any points on the anti-fascist scale.
well, I guess, and I didn't see it. Was it a very intentional, like, copied from the speech, or was it like a very similar speech that just like might have been coincidence? Or was it like it was pretty much like he knew that was the speech and he purposely said that?
It's one of those things where it literally looks like you go, uh, your buddy sends you an essay, right? And he goes, copy off it, but don't make it obvious. That's kind of how it
Yeah.
felt. That's kind of.
Not to like, I don't mean any, I'm not giving them any props on this, but I will say one thing that the Nazis were good at, I would guess, or it seems, is propaganda and gaining support for some of the most ridiculous and unpopular causes. Like they were able to gather to basically brainwash a bunch of people into believing what they're saying. So not that that's a good thing that they did, but it was they were good at doing it. They had it figured out. They had a science there. Just because you're good at getting people to listen to you and get in kind of propagandizing people into believing what you're saying does not necessarily mean that what you're saying is bad. Like the same thing could be said about pretty much any politician where, if you look at, say, like Bernie Sanders, for example, he's got very charismatic guy. He's a charming guy. People like him, you know, goes on Joe Rogan. He can really back his points good. And he does little tricks to try to get people to listen to him. But then at the end of the day, I mean, his ideology that he's saying also killed. I think it was more than the Nazis did under Stalin. I think there was like 20 million people killed, and so not to say that either of those are good, but I'm saying just because you're using a skill that was developed for a bad reason, but could be used for other reasons. I'm just trying to decipher between like you know are they good at propaganda or are they trying to genocide 6 million people? The difference, I guess.
It's just like that style of speech, essentially. What do you have? You have nothing. You are nothing. You are wickedness. You are jealousy. You are envy. You are hatred. You are nothing. You can build nothing. You can produce nothing. You can create nothing. We are the ones who build. We are the ones who create. We are the ones who lift up humanity. To our enemies, you have nothing to give. You have nothing to offer. You have nothing to share but bitterness. We have beauty. We have light. We have goodness. We have determination. We have vision. We have strength. We built the world that we inhabit now. It's very us versus them, like creating the enemy within, essentially.
So let me ask this question because I actually don't understand this fully. Even like someone like Hitler or Mussolini or something like this. What is the end goal of fascism in the United States now? Is fascism in support of capitalism, or is it looking to destroy capitalism, or is it totally different? I don't really see like what the purpose of it is when it comes to like I think we agree that we are kind of at the point where like the capitalists are running the show and the politicians are bought and sold and we know all of this. And so what is the purpose of bringing in like a fascist dictator who's like I don't I'm missing something in the logic of like so now part of the plan is to bring in this crazy guy who's going to do all of these like very oppressive things to people. Like how does that help the capitalists? I would think that if Trump brought in martial law or started a war against the democratic mayors of the cities, I would think that would like tank asset prices,
Right.
which isn't good
Yeah.
for the people who are running the show. So that's what doesn't make sense to me about it.
Well, you asked a few questions there. First, one of them, the first one was, what is the end goal of fascism? I think the end goal of fascism is essentially like dictatorship. It's single party control over the government, I believe, is the end goal of fascism. Control everything, essentially.
Would that end capitalism
Unitarian
then?
Unitarian control. And then where that ties into capitalism is if that lends into the credo of private control over the government, then maybe it's like, all right, there's fascist dictator at the top, and but then like just one step below that would be like the capitalists essentially, who then own like all the previously public institutions. Essentially, they control.
They're now the nobility,
Yeah, they're
basically.
the nobility, like the industrial class, like they're still the ruling class. They're just underneath one guy, sort of.
I guess what would be the difference between that and 5 years ago, as far as like the
More,
everyday life of a
yeah,
regular
it's
person?
it's more oppression. It's more um, demonizing of the other. There's the like we said, the nationalism aspect of it. So that's where gulags are formed. That's where gas chambers are formed. It's anyone who is not this specific race, gender, color, whatever, is not part of our group. So that's where it's more bad than what we currently
But
have. That's
here's the thing I'll say on that one, and being genuine too, not like a gotcha or anything. I've never once heard Trump say that.
no, no. You
I've
can't, you
never heard
can't,
him
you can't
say.
say that. You can't say that.
Basically, what it's coming down to is the number one difference is that, well, what a fascist does is he others these people, like you said. Um, I haven't seen that really at all. I mean, until recently, and which is when I started to say, like the fascists, I can see little remnants of it. But I mean, even when it comes to like the deportations, for example, he's not. I don't see him doing that. I don't really see him like making it about race or anything. What I do see is a lot of his opposition saying it's only because of their race or it's only, but it's like realistically, he's been talking about this illegal immigration problem for like 15 years. And then then the next question is, doesn't this hurt the capitalists more than anyone? So if he's really out for the big businessman, he's doing tax cuts, all of these things, and everyone says, oh, it's just to help the rich, it's to help the rich. How does the deportations help the rich? I think that hurts the rich and helps the lower middle class. Doesn't it? That's
Here's
at least what I've
here's
been told.
here's my issue with the deportation aspects. Trump is nowhere near the amount of deportations that Obama did. And apparently, like, he can't really come close from what I've seen. Like, Obama had an insane amount of deportations, and Trump just is not putting up those kind of numbers. So,
So what's all the fuss about?
that's the $30 trillion question, isn't it?
Obama was a fascist. It turns out Trump is Antifa.
I
I did see he
once,
designated.
I don't know. It once again comes down to like, what does ideology really mean anymore?
Yeah, we're definitely starting to lose it. It doesn't seem like anything really fits any type of coherent ideology. Um,
I think
that
I
comes down to
think
postmodernism, but
I think
we
I
won't
think
save that for another one.
I think yeah, probably wrap this one up here in a bit. Last topic, but we said on the phone call the other day, I think we were talking about like ideologies are blurring or probably even thrown out the wayside right now. I called Richie up. I'm like, I was thinking about this. If Trump came out and declared, I am seizing control of the public healthcare system, of the healthcare system in the United States. I am abolishing all private forms of healthcare. It will now be totally under my control. The government will control all forms of healthcare. There will be a single payer healthcare, and it's going to be me. I could fucking see the left coming out up in arms and saying, what the fuck? Trump's taking control over healthcare. What the hell? And then guys on the right would probably be like, fuck yeah, Trump's finally doing something for the common man. Trump's standing up for us. He's going to give us affordable healthcare that the government's going to pay for. And that's what fucking universal healthcare is, So it.
Well, I was talking to some people about this, and I was trying to kind of follow the logic path a little bit, but I really don't see I see I see a lot of people who are like pro-communism, anti-fascism, and I guess kind of where I was getting was, well, what's the difference if I think you might have brought this up one time too, where they do kind of come around and they're the same thing.
It loops back
Where
around.
it's
Absolutely.
it's authoritarianism is really the enemy, whether it comes in communist form or fascist form, and that's we can we call some, the right-wing authoritarians fascists and the left-wing authoritarians communists, but at
Authoritarians,
the end of the
communists.
day, I mean, you can take policies from, a communist authoritarian. Well, some of his policies can be applied into a non-authoritarian country, and same with probably you can go to a fascist authoritarian, and you could probably take some at least policies or ideas or something that, but that part wasn't authoritarian though. That part was actually what won the people over. And then after he got
Yeah.
that in, well, then he
It's
started
it's
going authoritarian.
it's like,
There's
wait, like business is booming on the one side, and then on the other side it's like, wait, we have all these great like public works. Like this is
Yeah, yeah,
awesome. Like this
exactly.
is
Yeah, and if it's
this
like
is
it's like, well,
awesome.
if we can get that done without the authoritarian aspect of
Yeah.
it, then that's fine. But as soon as you try to go, whenever people try to take the good ideas from, there's a reason they got to power. They had some good ideas, at least that they presented to the people. If people try to take those ideas that they presented originally, that might have been good ideas, but that's communist. But it's like, fine, it is, but then communist doesn't mean anything. It just means nothing. Now, the real issue is like, we don't want an authoritarian tyrant who's going to end democracy and run this as a dictatorship. As long as we don't have that, then, we can probably play around with some of these communist or whatever, whatever type of policies, as long as, we understand the importance of, checks and balances and the separation of powers and democracy and things like that. Once that starts getting overstepped, well, then that's when we have a problem.
Yeah. You said, to start that off, what's the difference between like communism and fascism? And I was just kind of playing it out in my head. It's like communism is when the government owns all businesses, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
fascism is when all the businesses own the government. So right. So it's like it's the same goddamn thing in the
At the
end.
end of the day, it's the
It's
same entity. It's the same
yeah,
thing.
it's the same idea. It's like some guys are controlling everything, and no one else has a say.
I mean, it kind of comes down to the idea of that, like, there's always a constant struggle between government and business, and so it's whoever wins. If the government wins, then you become communist, and if the companies win, then you become fascist. But you don't really want either of
I
those. You
think
want
that's
to be in the
exactly what it.
struggle.
I think that's exactly what it is, possibly.
So, I mean, up until, hopefully still now, but at the very least, up until now, we've been lucky enough to live during the time of the struggle where the government and the companies are still grappling. And I mean, if we are to end up going into the fascist route, that will just indicate that the companies won and now they own everything.
Well, dude, because I have seen before Trump that our country is sliding towards fascism, right? And I think that's what it is. It's because of corporate control, essentially, right? If that's the definition that's used, right? I've heard the term neoliberal fascists. That's describing the left, right? So it it's it's sort of that idea that like it's might not be like it's not just Trump's fault, essentially, is probably what it boils down to.
He's just the symptom. I mean, for all we know, it could also be, he came off as this, like, yeah, all these politicians are bought and sold. He would say that all the time, and it's like, well, he could be too. He probably is at this point, and so maybe everyone looks at Trump and Trump's businesses and things like that, but it could very well just be that, like, he's just the face. Like I said, he's the mascot, and really the powers at work are not going to step out into the front lines.
Yeah, because you power resides in the shade for the most part, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anytime someone steps too high into the limelight, I mean, let's harken back to Rome here. They would have triumphs. Whenever a general conquered a new territory of land, they would parade through the city. He would show off all the slaves he won, all the gold he won, everything like that. But then riding along in his carriage, there's a guy whispering in his ear, "Memento mori." Remember that you too will die, right? So it's kind of that idea that like you rise too high and you're gonna get taken out. The real power plays down low here and keeps things out of the limelight.
Yeah. No, I mean that it just it it bothers me because when I try to think it through, like, everyone likes to think everyone, there's someone kind of behind the scenes running it, and in the case we're in, it doesn't. Obviously, it does seem like the businesses, the big business, big corporations have the power over the government, but it also doesn't really seem like it would make sense because they would want to conserve, you would think that the big businesses would be the ones who would want the opposite of what Trump kind of represents. Trump fires up the people, gets them riled up, gets them rebelling, and we've already discussed the problems that we have with our current economy, and all of these big businesses have assets that are denominated in US dollars. And so if the US dollar hyperinflates, yeah, their assets go up in US dollars, but it doesn't, and they understand this, it doesn't make their assets any more valuable. What it does is it destabilizes the system. So they're taking such a massive risk on everything that they've earned. That doesn't make sense either. It like you said, I guess like you said originally, like it's all incoherent. It does it almost seems like no one's in control, and that's like even scarier, kind of.
Yeah, it's everyone thinks that you have that like shadow government, that cabal of elites that controls things. In reality, it's probably not true. It's probably thousands of different forces all playing against each other, competing against each other, probably sometimes colluding with each other. But then, all right, so six wealthy guys are colluding, trying to do something. I'm sure there's six wealthy guys who are looking at that saying like, hey, we could do the
The
opposite.
opposite,
Yeah,
yeah,
we can
yeah,
do the
yeah.
opposite of that sort of deal. And it,
Yeah,
it,
that definitely is the case to at least
yeah,
some degree for
it
sure.
probably, it really doesn't seem like you look at all the randomness, and I agree with you, right? If the corporations had total control over everything, they would want to keep things exactly the way they are. They wouldn't want people to be like, oh, like this shit blows. They wouldn't want people saying, oh, maybe we need to change a lot of things quickly. So I agree with you there. There might be no one in control.
I mean, I do think that what you just said there actually makes a lot of sense, and we talked about this too, is that it very well, I think this might be the most likely, actually, now that I think about it. It very well might be like the old money versus the new money, kind of like the old guard. If you look at some of these massive corporations that blew up during the 70s, 80s, and now either the founders are very old or they've died and their kids have inherited the money. And then you've got the big banks that saw their heyday in the 80s, 90s. And now all of a sudden these companies who thought that they were entrenched, who thought that they had no, Disney comes to mind. Disney thought they were entrenched, and that's also one of the companies that you see dabbling in politics quite a bit, is because they feel threatened by the fact that these new wave internet companies like Netflix and these YouTube even are taking attention away, and it's hurting their stock. And so they start trying to push politics and grasp on. And now I think Disney's screwed because the left doesn't like Disney and the right doesn't like Disney. I saw the left was protesting Disney, and I was like, oh, hell yeah, we're on the same page. We
Yeah,
both agree for once that we should protest and you know, not support Disney because they pissed off the right for the last 10 years, and then they went and pissed off the left. And so now that everyone hates them.
yeah, it is. That is probably the most likely explanation, is that it's just different groups of powerful, influential people wanting different things. And that's probably where most of the disagreement comes from.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you get like generations who come up together, like just like all generations, like all groups, all of the rookie NFL players who just got drafted last year. They all probably have known each other for a while and kind of grew up together, and they'll probably, as their careers progress, by the time they retire and they're making money, like they'll probably be friends and stuff. And like some of the biggest entrepreneurs that came up at the same time, that you did, if you're a big entrepreneur, you're looking at that guy as either like an ally or a competitor or maybe, a potential business partner. But like either way, you people kind of have a sense of like, who they're competing with in this. And so you probably, what I think is likely is that you had a group of like the old wave entrepreneurs who had a lot of this network technology, like cable TV and something like a Disney or Walmart is a good. These are all people who kind of, in one way or another, became these giants of industry and felt that they had basically become they've become the royalty, and there's really no way to challenge them. They've got economies of scale. They built these massive businesses, and from it's smooth sailing. And then, all of a sudden in the early 2000s, after the dot-com bubble failed, they were probably like, oh, hell yeah, that was all a big fad. And then all of a sudden in the 2000s, now all of a sudden, the Walton family is looking and seeing that Jeff Bezos is taking all of their money, and the Disney family is seeing that Netflix is taking all of their money, and it's like, well, who are these new guys? And you do kind of see those, and I'm sure down the line, the Zuckerbergs and Bezos and Elons, and they'll be sitting rich, and there'll be some new wave of technology that
Yeah,
overruns them. So it could be we could be in the middle of that kind of
yeah.
that change in the guard, I guess.
Yeah, it could be that too. It's a intergenerational struggle more than anything. It's, people brought up with different beliefs who then have enough influence to try and implement change versus people who were the old guard like you were saying and kind of want things to stay the same or, change better for them. But I'd agree, yeah. I think that's a pretty good spot to end this one. You got any closing thoughts?
No, yeah, I think that's it. I think this was a good one. Talked about some interesting topics. We should keep. We got a Halloween special coming up soon. Gonna have. Actually, I haven't even talked about this with you, but I talked to our producer, and yeah, he said he's in. So I have a Halloween special coming up soon, and we'll get into some deep debates. But thanks for tuning in.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.